Welcome back, guys. So it's a new week and a new episode of Stargirl Season 1, the 6th episode of the season, otherwise titled The Justice Society. So on this episode, we are being introduced to the new version of the Justice Society, full on. I mean, this is not the final version. We're gonna meet more people, we're gonna get more characters into this Justice Society. We know that we are going to get a Green Lantern, for example, and that's probably gonna be Jade from the comics. We know that we're probably gonna get another Thunderbolt, probably either Jakeem Williams or Jenny Williams, his sister, on the series. I'm also assuming that we might end up getting a new Flash, like someone to replace the Jay Garrick Flash that we did meet on the first episode. Actually, we never met him. We met his helmet, but the helmet is there. There's a good chance we're gonna get one. And I'm assuming that new Flash is going to be Jesse Quick, and for good reason as well. Going to be talking about all of that and more over the course of this video, but first things first, last week's episode, that was full of Easter eggs, like really full of Easter eggs. I didn't have time to post a video during the week, so I only posted it on Saturday. You can still check it out though if you haven't yet. But in the context of that video, and before I move on to this episode, there's the issue of Janitor Justin. A lot of people started discussing the entire he is the puppet of the Fiddler, based on what Pat said on last week's episode, in conjunction with the Irish accent that the guy had. And the thing I would want to add here is, it is possible that he's the Fiddler's puppet, but Fiddler's puppet or not, he was definitely never the Fiddler's puppet from birth, and definitely not to death. So that kind of makes it into a temporary situation, if that were to be the case, of course. Let's remember as well that his identity is not the Fiddler's puppet. His identity is whoever he was before that, and whoever he's gonna be after that. And there's that one Easter egg that I never really noticed, but someone in the comments to my video, my episode 5 video, Bobby V, did mention, which is basically the cap of Janitor Justin. There's that drawing or weaving of a horse and a knight on his back right on that cap. So if anything, that's an Easter egg that he might actually be who I think he is. You know, Sir Justin, Justin Arthur, or the person also known as the Shining Knight. But okay though, less about last week's episode and more about this week's episode. The new episode focuses a bit more on Artemis at the very beginning. I mean, we got introduced to her last week, but there's a certain focus on her this week. Already established, she is Artemis Croc from the comics, the very same comic book character that Evelyn Sharp on Arrow was based on. That's why she got the name Artemis. That's where she got the name Artemis from. Daughter to Sportsmaster, aka Larry or Lawrence Crusher Croc, and Paula Brooks Croc, aka the first Tigress from the comics, making Artemis into the second Tigress at some point on the pages of the source material. But okay, the violence that she displays on this episode, the violence that she displays on last week's episode, that right there is very representative of what she is, who she is, and how she is in the comics. Like, you know, the villain that she is. But next up here though is the McKents, and away from what is true to the comics and what is not, I really like how Jordan, aka Icicle, is portrayed on the series. I mean, the series continues the game of humanizing him to insane extents. So even though we know he is an ass, he killed Starman, he killed his teammate, and he killed an innocent kid, you know, Joey Zarek, you kind of still find yourself sympathizing with him over there. I mean, Malcolm Merlyn had a similar story on Arrow, but you never really felt that kind of sympathy towards him as you feel it with Icicle. The acting and the writing for the character, they're both really off the roof. And this is coming from someone who actually liked the acting and the writing for Malcolm Merlyn, but both over here are way better. At least the writing is definitely way better. But while still on the McKents though, I do find it interesting that focus would once again jump to Cameron McKent. I mean, Cameron was focused on the third episode of the season, titled Icicle, and that's because he is Cameron McKent. He is the second Icicle and son to the Icicle that was the focus of that episode. However though, bringing him back on this episode makes a lot of sense in the context that it is the first episode that we're getting a proper introduction to Artemis. On the pages of the comics, these two would end up married and having a kid together. Like I mentioned on my first video for Stargirl ever, you know, they do really inbreed within the Injustice Society. But before I circle back to the earlier events on this episode and some of the cool Easter eggs on it, who comes up with these names is a statement that I'm loving about all of these series, all the comic book series, and even some of the movies. I mean, this is in commentary on villain and superhero aliases, and that's a staple of almost every superhero show, and has now become a staple of this show as well, now having been used 2 times so far over the course of 6 episodes. But alright, let's talk about the 2 conversations on this episode between Pat and Courtney. The first conversation between the 2 of them early on in the events of the episode, that was just hilarious. I mean, with her shocking him with news of all the people who've become new versions of the Justice Society members. The second conversation at the very end of the episode, that was a little bit different, but still quite hilarious. I mean, she's just going on, and he's being completely sarcastic there, and that was one of the funniest scenes of the episodes, really. To be honest as well, I never really liked any of the 2 Wilson brothers like Owen and Luke. Always preferred Luke's acting over Owen's, but nonetheless, it was never really all that stellar, never really all that impressive to me. But his role as Pat Dugan is really putting his acting in a whole new light on my end, really loving the acting for the character. But yeah though, we've got a few Ted Grant Easter eggs, a few Yolanda Montes and Ted Grant Easter eggs out of the comics. Now the series is replacing the fact that Ted Grant was Yolanda's godfather on the pages of the source material, but it's still giving us an Easter egg to just that, by making him some kind of a role model for her. Watching all those boxer videos, for example, that's part of all of it. Ted Grant's boxing connection to Yolanda as well does go deeper on the pages of the comics because he is friends with her father, Juan Montes, who happens to be a boxer as well on the pages of the source material. And since we're talking about her family, that reminds me of another Easter egg that I completely did not at all mention on the 3rd episode. Now that's all about her brother, Alex Montes. In the comics, her brother is actually Jose Montes, her cousin is Alex Montes, so that's a reference to her cousin rather than her brother. Her cousin, on the pages of the comics, ends up becoming Eclipso, and that's part of a sequence all about vengeance for a dead Yolanda. That part is referenced, or shall I say Easter egg, by his defensiveness of Yolanda on the 3rd episode of the season. Now before I jump to more Easter eggs, Beth has got to be the worst superhero ever, like wearing those goggles in public, talking to them. You'd have thought as well that Courtney would have at least asked her not to do that publicly, but I guess not. But okay, Rick insisting on keeping the hourglass, becoming the second Hourman. Once again, that parallels what he did on the pages of the source material. Pat as well disapproving of all of it, wanting to stop Rick from becoming the second Hourman. That does parallel what Rex did on the pages of the comics. He did disapprove of all of it because of the addictive nature of the Miraclo pill. Because yeah, back there it's not really the hourglass that is the source of their powers, it is the Miraclo pill. But Rick Tyler is quite stubborn in both cases. He would at the time join up with Infinity Inc. on the pages of the comics, a team-up that included members that we've already met like Yolanda's version of Wildcat and Beth's version of Dr. Midnight, Henry Jr.'s Brainwave, and also Sylvester Pemberton, who in the comics preceded Stargirl as the first Star-Spangled Kid but never ended up becoming Starman. Now one of the characters of note in that team-up would be Jade, the Green Lantern, and Alan Scott's daughter. And with the Lantern activating on last week's episode, we might be getting our signal, our hint, that we'll be meeting Jade, aka Jenny Hayden, sometime this season or on season 2. There's always a chance as well that Jenny Williams is not, as I expect, gonna be, Jenny Thunder, but is rather going to end up becoming the next Green Lantern. That's also a possibility here. But to make a long story short, a Green Lantern is planned for the future, and based on what Jeff Jones hinted, no Easter egg is going to end up just being an Easter egg like forever, but will rather materialize at some point if the series continues to that point. But there's actually a lot of room to bring about a lot of characters into the series. Jade is but one of them. We still have a Flash helmet without a Flash. Jesse Quick, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, is definitely a future option here. Probably more of a Season 2 option. After all, we've got a bunch of teens, and while Rick will probably take a liking to one of the current members of the New Justice Society, from a pure comic book perspective, he does end up getting married, falling in love and getting married to Jesse Quick. So that's quite the solid possibility. But I'm getting closer to the end of this video. We've got broadcasting equipment needing a satellite to use it. I'm thinking they're planning to use the Fiddler to hypnotize the entirety of Blue Valley at this point as part of the plan. But alright though, in the middle of all that talk at the very end of the episode, we come to realize that for their plan to materialize, to actually achieve something, they still need Brainwave. There are definitely two takeaways out of that statement. Number one, this buys the new Justice Society time. These guys are not ready yet. And number two, they might end up needing to use Henry Jr. instead of Henry Sr. in the process, which means Henry Jr. would start on the wrong side, yet probably be destined to end on the good side as per his comic book destiny. He might even be forced to help them under some kind of duress. But here are a couple of honorable mentions though. One, the showdown here was not really about the Justice Society versus the Gambler, but rather about the Justice Society versus the not-so-nice Croc couple. Number two, there was the scene that I was waiting for, a lot of people were probably waiting for, the moment that the new Justice Society is fully formed. And we did see that scene before, at the very end of the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover. But finally, there is number three. They are now the target of the Injustice Society. They are looking for them, they're gonna hunt them, they're gonna be their first target before even working on their mission. So they're probably going to try to lure them out, just like Icicle did with Stargirl on the 3rd episode of the season. That said though, my work here is done, so let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode. Let me know if I missed any Easter eggs, because I feel like I probably missed a few. I mean, watching last week's episode with all the Easter eggs makes you think this episode just did away with having a lot of Easter eggs, or I just was blinded to them. Let me know as well if you did like this video by dropping it one of those much appreciated likes, subscribing to this channel, and make sure while you're at it to enable notifications in order to get updates whenever I upload a new video, publish a new community post, or start a new live stream. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, be it Stargirl or otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in to this review video. Stay safe and have a great day.